I used to negotiate with my daughter for 45 minutes just to get her to try one spoonful of soup. I offered rewards, made airplane sounds, turned on a cartoon, promised dessert, then promised something better than dessert. At the end of it, we were both exhausted. The soup was cold, and she still hadn't touched it. I assumed this was just what dinner with small children looked like. A nightly negotiation. A minor recurring war. I was wrong. The first time I read about how dinner works in a typical French household, I thought it was exaggerated. A 90-minute meal. Toddlers at the table from the start. No screens, no separate plates, no special bowls of buttered pasta made just for the child. And the parents, the part that startled me most. Not pleading, not bargaining, just eating, talking, passing the bread. I wanted to know how that was possible, whether it was cultural mythology or something real. So I started looking into the research, and what I found changed the way I think about mealtimes entirely. By the end of this, you'll understand 4 specific practices that French families repeat from infancy, why each one works according to developmental science, and one thing you can try at your table tonight that costs nothing and requires no preparation, not a parenting overhaul. One small shift in how you speak, or rather, in what you stop saying. But before the practices, there is a concept that sits underneath all of them. Once you understand it, the rest clicks. The French call it l'éducation du goût, the education of taste. The phrase sounds almost literary, but it is also a deeply practical philosophy that shapes how French parents think about food from the very first meal a child eats. The idea is this: taste is not innate, it is learned. Children are not born preferring chicken nuggets over ratatouille. They are shaped, slowly and patiently, by what they are exposed to and how they experience that exposure. The table is not just a place to refuel, it is, without anyone announcing it, a classroom. When I started researching this, I went through cross-cultural studies on children's food preferences, and one set of findings kept nagging at me. Researchers at Cornell University studied eating behaviors in French and American children and found that French children, consistently and across income levels, showed significantly higher willingness to try unfamiliar foods between ages 2 and 5. The gap was not small. When researchers tried to explain it, they kept arriving at the same answer. It was not genetics. It was not some mysterious quality of the French palate. It was ritual. French children experienced meals as social events rather than feeding sessions. That distinction turns out to be deeply biological. A 2018 study published in the journal Appetite found that French toddlers were introduced to an average of 37 distinct flavors in their first year of life compared to fewer than 20 in most comparable American samples. The first time I read that number, I thought, so what? 37 versus 20. But when you understand what happens in a child's developing palate in the first 3 years of life, the gap becomes enormous. The window for flavor acceptance is widest in infancy and early toddlerhood. After age 4 or 5, neophobia, the fear of new foods, tends to peak and then calcify into preference. French families, without ever framing it as a developmental strategy, have been exploiting that early window for generations. They just called it dinner. Here is where it gets more complex, and also more challenging for those of us who were not raised this way. Because l'éducation du goût is not a set of techniques you can layer onto an existing mealtime structure. It requires changing the underlying logic of what feeding a child is for. And the first shift is the hardest one for most parents I've spoken to. The first practice: French parents serve children the same food as adults, always in smaller portions. Not a simplified version, not a blander approximation, the same dish. When a French family sits down to a meal of roasted cod with herbed vegetables and a green salad, the 2-year-old at the table gets roasted cod with herbed vegetables and a green salad on a smaller plate. There is no separate drawer of crackers, no emergency pack of dry cereal, no negotiation over whether a dish has too many things mixed together. There is food, everyone eats it. What's most surprising about this isn't that French children comply over time. It's the mechanism behind why they do. Developmental psychologists who study food neophobia have consistently found that children who regularly observe adults eating a food with apparent enjoyment are far more likely to accept that same food themselves, typically within 8 to 15 exposures. Not 1 try, not 3. 8 to 15. Because French families eat together and eat the same thing, those exposures accumulate naturally, without anyone making a performance of the moment. The child watches a parent pick up a mussel, open it, eat it with pleasure, and something registers quietly, below the level of argument. The second practice is perhaps the most counterintuitive, because it involves doing almost nothing. French parents introduce 1 new food per week, without pressure and without comment. They place it on the plate. If the child doesn't eat it, nothing is said. No encouragement, no subtle disappointment in the voice, no celebratory response if the child does try it. The food appears. Life at the table continues. Then it appears again the following week, and the week after that. There is a French word that captures the spirit of this approach. Tranquille, quietly, without fuss. Karen Labillon, a Canadian researcher who spent an extended period living in France with her own young children and documented her observations in striking detail, noticed that French parents almost never used the phrase, "Try it, you'll like it." They were more likely to say something close to, "You don't have to eat it tonight," and then genuinely let it go. The removal of pressure is itself the strategy. When there is no pressure, there is no battle to win or lose. When there is no battle, the child's entire attention shifts from defending their position to simply noticing what's sitting on the plate. Put yourself at that table for a moment. Your child has pushed a piece of fennel to the edge of their bowl 4 weeks in a row, and you say nothing. You keep eating. You talk about something unrelated. You pass the bread. That requires a restraint that runs against every parenting instinct most of us were raised with. The deep pull to encourage, to coach, to make a thing of things. But the developmental research on food exposure is consistent. Making it a thing is precisely what extends resistance. The child who is fighting a battle cannot simultaneously be curious about food. There's a question underneath all of this that deserves a direct answer. Are French children simply temperamentally calmer at the table? Is this a cultural difference that cannot travel? I've turned that question over for a long time, and I don't think the answer is yes. What I think is closer to the truth: French parents are calmer at the table, and children, who are extraordinarily sensitive to the emotional register of adults, mirror that. The practice creates the culture, not the other way around. What do you think? Have you ever tried placing an unfamiliar food in front of your child with no comment, no encouragement, no reaction at all? I'd genuinely love to hear how it went. Leave a comment below with what happened. The third practice moves away from food and into something that surprised me when I first understood it. French families treat the dinner table as conversation time, not eating time. That reframe sounds subtle. It is not. When eating is the primary goal of the meal, a child who is slow or reluctant becomes a problem that needs solving. When conversation is the primary goal, they become a participant. They are asked real questions. They are listened to. They watch adults engage with ideas, laugh, disagree warmly, tell stories that have no moral. The meal becomes something they want to be at, not something being administered to them. A 2019 developmental study from the University of Chicago followed children from age 2 through age 5 and found that children who regularly participated in adult-led conversation at family mealtimes showed measurably stronger language development by age 4 than children in households where meals were shorter, quieter, or screen-accompanied. The effect held regardless of parental education level. It was the quality of the conversation itself, the back and forth, the modeling of how adults talk and listen, that drove the outcome. French families have structured this in for generations without designing it as a language program. The long dinner simply assumes that the child at the table is a person worth talking to. Here's an uncomfortable take, one I've had to sit with myself. I think the Western habit of creating a separate category for children at the dinner table, separate food, separate timeline, separate entertainment waiting on the other side of the meal, has quietly taught children that mealtimes are something to endure rather than something to inhabit. We optimized for efficiency. Get the children fed, then the adults can finally eat in peace. In doing so, we removed the very conditions that build a child's relationship with food, with patience, with the family itself. The French did not design l'éducation du goût as a formal intervention. It emerged from the simple, stubborn insistence that dinner is social, and everyone present is part of the social. The fourth and final practice is the one I think about most often now. French parents do not offer an alternative if the child refuses what is served. To be precise about what this means in practice, because there is a widespread misunderstanding, it does not mean children go hungry and no one cares. It means there is no exit ramp through a separate kid-friendly meal. The child can eat what is on the plate, eat a piece of bread, or wait until the next meal. The choice exists, the negotiation does not, and crucially, there is no emotional drama attached to whichever choice the child makes. The parent's responsibility is the food and the warmth of the table. What the child does at that table is, within reason, the child's own business. Researchers who study how parents approach feeding call this authoritative feeding, distinct from authoritarian feeding, which involves pressure and force, and permissive feeding, which involves endless accommodation. Authoritative feeding holds a structure while remaining genuinely warm. A 2020 meta-analysis drawing on studies across 12 countries found that authoritative feeding was the single strongest predictor of a varied, adventurous diet in children by age 5. Stronger than parental nutrition knowledge. Stronger than socioeconomic background. Stronger than school food programs. Structure plus warmth. Held consistently. One detail in that research has stayed with me. Children of parents who practiced authoritative feeding were also rated by their teachers as having stronger emotional regulation in classroom settings by age 5, more patience during waiting periods, more capacity to sit with discomfort without escalating. The researchers speculated that the dinner table was functioning as a low-stakes daily practice environment for self-regulation. The child who learns, over months and without drama, to sit with fennel on the edge of their bowl is quietly building a skill that will surface later in very different contexts, in a waiting room, on a long car ride, in a classroom where things do not go their way. The French dinner table is not a stricter version of the Western dinner table. It is a different project entirely. It is not optimized for getting the child to eat their vegetables on any given Tuesday. It is structured, slowly and over years, to build a person who is comfortable at a table, comfortable with unfamiliar things on a plate, comfortable with waiting, comfortable with conversation that does not revolve around them. The vegetables are almost incidental to that larger project. If there is one thing to try tonight, try this. Remove one sentence from your dinner. The sentence is any version of just try one bite. Replace it with nothing. Set the plate down. Eat your own food. Find something you genuinely want to talk about. See what happens in the room when the pressure is absent. It will not transform everything in one evening. But the first time your child reaches across and picks something up on their own, without being asked, without a reward waiting on the other side, you will feel that small, quiet shift. The shift the French have been relying on calmly and without fanfare for a very long time. If you want to go deeper on the slow rhythms that make family life feel steadier, the next video on this channel explores something the Italians call dolce far niente, the art of doing nothing, and what it teaches children about rest and boredom. I think you will find a thread connecting it directly to what we talked about here. Subscribe so you do not miss it, and if this resonated, share it with one parent who needs a quieter dinner tonight.